Now I'm back. After a one-day hiatus, we're back with some more NBA top 5 greatest players. In this installment, we're going to talk about the New Orleans Pelicans. And like I said, some teams are storied franchises with a lot of pieces. The New Orleans Pelicans, starting from when the original Charlotte Hornets relocated to New Orleans to present when they changed their name to the Pelicans, have not had a proud history. It's going to be a relatively short list, or I'm just going to go right to the point. And sadly, there's not going to be a lot to say about this. The one asterisk to this is, for all my vids in this playlist, I'm only using a certain player one time. I use Chris Paul for the greatest Clipper of all time, for that impact he had on them. The reason I put the Clippers over the Pelicans/Hornets is because there was a longer period where the Clippers were better off under Paul than they were with the Hornets/Pelicans, because it took a few years for the ball to get rolling before they at least made playoff contention. But with that being said, let's get to it. So Chris Paul was on the Clippers list, not this one. So the top 5 New Orleans Pelicans of all time. Number 5, I'm going to start with Brandon Ingram. Now, he wasn't really a needle mover, but he was a solid player, good player, one of the better players on the Pelicans. It's a shame that those years were wasted on a team that really didn't have much to do with. I mean, when Zion was healthy, they still had a few decent seasons, and Ingram was a good second piece, but he really didn't move the needle as a team. But, hey, he's still one of the better pieces for the Pelicans, for better or worse, so he gets the nod at number 5. Number 4, I'm going to go Jamal Mashburn. Now, he was another solid player in those early years when they moved to New Orleans. His best years were behind him statistically, but he was still a solid role player and one of the better pieces on those teams, where they did make the playoffs a couple times early on in New Orleans when they were still in the Eastern Conference before the Charlotte Bobcats expansion team joined and they relocated out west. Granted, in a weak Eastern Conference, but they still made the playoffs, and Mashburn was a piece to that. You know, was a pretty good player, at least worthy of a nod here. Again, kind of saying more about the Pelicans. No offense to Mashburn, no offense to Ingram, but says more about them. Number 3, I'm going to go with Zion Williamson. Now, I got him number 3 because when he's on the court and when he's healthy, he's a difference maker. But, unfortunately, he's missed a lot of time due to injuries. Now, if he would have stayed healthy this entire time from 2019 to 2025, he could have easily been number 1 on this list. But, because of the injuries, because of the missed time, he's only at number 3. But he still gets to number 3 because of the impact he has when he's on the court. He's a dynamic player when he's on, but he isn't always on. He's sometimes got his personal problems that stands in the way. But I got to respect what he does when he's on his game. He still is one of the better players in the NBA today, and at least worthy of a recognition as one of the greatest Pelicans. Number 2, I'm going to put David West, and here's the reason why. Because he was with them for a longer period of time, and he was more active and available for them during his tenure. He made a couple All-Stars in the late 2000s, led them to the playoffs a few times. And, you know, for that right there, I got to put him the nod over Zion for availability. And he was a good player during that time period, averaged over 20 points several times, and was with the guy behind Chris Paul leading the way during that rebuild. Now, unfortunately, Chris Paul isn't number 1 because I decided I was only going to use a certain player once. I used him as an all-time Clipper, so that opens the door for Anthony Davis. Now, unfortunately, they couldn't put a good team around him while he was there, but he was he was a difference maker out of Kentucky. He came in and he wreaked havoc. I mean, and his individual accolades during that time period was good enough for him to eventually land a spot on the Lakers and the honor of playing with LeBron James and winning a championship. But it was those years with the Pelicans, Anthony Davis dominated and built up his resume and increased his trade value by finally come 2019. Hey, he was set to go. But for that right there, the most individual dominant player in Pelicans/Hornets history behind Chris Paul, who's not on this list for reasons I just stated. But for that right there, easily well-rounded offense and defensive player. You guys know Anthony Davis, one of the better defensive players in today's NBA. And for that right there, I got him as the greatest Pelican of all time. You guys comment, let me know who your top 5 New Orleans Pelicans are. Coming up next, top 5 New York Knicks. Stay tuned.